One of the most pressing challenges I hear from agency owners and sales managers is this: how can I ensure my commercial insurance producers are hitting their goals without feeling overwhelmed and lost? Well, you're not alone. I mean, many agency leaders invest in traditional sales training programs that fail to deliver, leaving new producers feeling unprepared and unable to generate enough new business. And this leads to frustration, high turnover, and ultimately an inability to compete effectively in the crowded commercial insurance marketplace. So the real secret to onboarding and training new producers successfully lies in niche-specific training and a structured onboarding process. In this video, I'll walk you through a proven plan that will prepare your new producers to start selling commercial insurance successfully within 90 days. We'll cover everything from setting actionable goals and using a foolproof sales call script to identifying and targeting potential clients in a profitable niche, equipping them with effective strategies for proactive service, and more. So let's talk about the numbers a little bit. You've hired how many producers?
Well, that number is 21.
You've hired 21, or Oakbridge, or the firm has hired 21?
The firm has hired 21.
Yeah, and out of those 21, how many have you, if we're going to say put the rubber stamp of Cynthia on it, how many did you rubber stamp and go, I'd hire this guy?
See, I'm doing the math real quick. 14.
14. So let's talk about those 14 for a little bit. Out of the 14 that you put your rubber stamp on, and it's all happened in 3 years. So just tell us kind of the story behind what kind of results or success, or maybe how many left, how many still there, and the ones who are there, what's going on, just however you want to phrase it.
We put 25, through the hiring process at some level and made 8 offers, hired 6, disqualified 10. And so I have 4 that have graduated from the program. What I have described as they are hitting their goals consistently. Their average revenue is bigger than 20. They will be $1 million producers in 5 years. They've all hit above $500,000 or are like inches away, which is where they get the equity grant here at Oakbridge.
At the end of less than 3 years.
3 years.
Let's do the numbers again. You hired 25 or interviewed 25?
Interviewed 25, disqualified 10.
Boom, right out of the top, 15 are gone, so 15's left.
Made 8 offers.
8 offers on the 15.
And 6 started, and I have been hired.
And then of those 6, 4 of them are on track to be $500,000 producers at the end of 3 years.
Yes.
And the other 2, willy-nilly, send them somewhere else or a different department or reassigned or something like that.
Well, here's where my numbers get a little funky because, I'm tracking organic hires and then I'm also training and developing acquisition producers. So they come to Oakbridge via an acquisition. So I'm tracking those guys too. So of the 4 that have graduated, they were all organically hired using that. I repositioned 4 just this in the last, which is kind of helping me a little bit adjust my mentality. And I don't know if I should or not, but as we go from 100 to 300 million, we have a chief revenue officer now. So I think some of my hiring stats are going to be different because I'm not just hiring for commercial middle market anymore. I'm hiring for small business, high net worth personal lines. So I repositioned 4 into other roles. 2 went to small business, 2 went to personal lines, and then 1 is now going to be positioned into just a retention producer.
And so then they were repositioned first and foremost because they really didn't fit the middle market producer profile, if you will, or just because there was such a need over there and you did it.
In my development process, year 1 is training, and we do you got the training wheels on, then we take the training wheels off. And I'm doing reviews with these guys at day 91, at 6 months, at 12 months, 18 months, 24 months. So what's starting to happen is at 24 months, I'm kind of looking at the expectation, walking through that review with them, and they're just not, it's too hard for them. They're not wired for it, and they're just not making it. So rather than, they're great humans, they're just in the wrong seat on the bus.
So then you give them a seat that more fits what they're probably capable of doing, different sort of pressure, different sort of intellect, different sort of all that stuff.
I looked at some of the GPI scores and some of the commonalities there, and the ability to close sales is the biggest factor for those guys. I was surprised. I thought it would be prospecting, but no, it was the ability to actually bring it home. And so on the transactional side, it's based on who they like and who's got the cheapest price. So I'm going to start tracking stats there now and see if they succeed once repositioned.
All right, so let's go back and let's talk about that. The ones that you repositioned was primarily because on the GPI, the ability to get the sell closed, which has to do with assertiveness. A lot of it has to do with assertiveness, asking for the order, staying in there. They didn't have enough of that. Is that what you're saying?
So I pulled a bunch of overviews, and the average score of those people, the average GPI score is 59. But what was most interesting was where, you know, how the yellow, red, green work, right? So they were consistently an average low on intensity and drive, low independence, and low optimism. The guys that actually failed and left the company, they were out of range in the red on intensity, drive, independence, wait for it, trust, and optimism. So those are the patterns.
So now it's becoming a lot more predictable for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Interesting. So the GPI is we call it the GRIT personality inventory. GRIT is our brand. In fact, she held up the book. Hold up the book again, Cynthia. So that's the
It's
book.
right here.
Yeah, Grit, Find, Hire, and Develop Real Producers. That was based upon a case study in Fort Worth, Texas, where I helped hire 34, 29 made it. I reverse engineered the process that led to that. We wrote the book. And then we actually co-developed a personality inventory that really is for hiring $1 million producers, people that absolutely have $1 million producer talent.
And
And
I
what's
define that. I've changed the way I define that now. I use the quick start language. Some guys can, I mean, because there's a lot of guys that can develop $1 million practice over 25 years.
right?
What the grit hiring assessment does for me is it tells me who can I get to 1 million and it was 10, but now I'm proving to myself that I can do it in 5.
Pretty darn quick.
Yeah.
Really quick by industry standards. Yeah. Which means they're averaging a couple $100,000, $200,000 new business year and retaining 99% of it, somewhere in that range, right?
And they're moving up market every year. So the average top 20 accounts, they range from 20 to $68,000. In that year 3, there's 4 of them and they are all consistent in that.
Yeah,
None
so
of them cold calling anymore.
20 to 68,000 in revenue, working existing relationships or introductions into those accounts, walking in using, for the most part, the web sales call process, and walking out with BORs on the second, worst case, third call.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. We're not going to get into how you recruit these people. I mean, everybody needs to come up their own way. But from a recruiting perspective, in the book, we talk about the 3 W's: why insurance, why your agency, and why you as a leader. And that as a recruiter, you need to get really good at that because you really need to make your candidates drool to want to come to work for you. Uh-oh, she's holding up something. All right, there we have. What is
You
that?
just described, these are handwritten notes on what would you, because I believe that our best recruiters are the sales talent inside the producer development. So I make them write what you'd say about the industry, what you'd say about Oakbridge, and what you'd say about the production, the producer training program, and give me the name of someone.
Nice. So we cover that in the book a little bit. Everybody complains you can't find good producers. No, but you can find good people and determine can they be good producers. And the best way to find good people is through your staff and your producers because they all got relationships. And if you got 20 staff and 10 producers or whatever numbers you want, that's 30 sources for you. And, as they're raising their kids, going to volleyball tournaments and basketball tournaments and, piano
The
recital,
private schools that their
private
kids
school,
attend. Yeah.
everybody's meeting great people
Yeah.
because they come from great families. They come from success. The world is full of opportunity. You just got to get a new set of lenses to go see it. And then you got to have a story then to make it compelling for them to want to come talk to you. And then the second part of that hiring process is having a good cop, bad cop. Good cop recruits, bad cop then takes them through a pretty tough interview process. along with the GPI, the personality inventory. And then if they make it through that, then you make an offer, and then you make the offer, and either they accept it or not. If they do accept it, then you start training them. That's your onboarding. So talk about how you have evolved, because you've been in this business for, we're going to say 30 years, how you've evolved, from what it was like at previous firms you worked with to now what you're doing now that honestly you've had control over your way. So kind of talk about the past and the present. Do you mind?
No, I don't mind. I was a sweat equity partner in a small shop in middle Florida. And, it was an interest. I mean, that's how I became a client of yours the first time.
Right.
And my job was to develop the sales talent. And in a small, I mean, we had some pretty good success. We went from 1 million to 4.2 in 7 years. But the hiring, that's where I started trying to help agency principals understand that it took more than just a nice person that came from a good family, that's a caddy at your country club to determine whether they could do this or not. Because there's a reason why these guys make so much money. If everybody could do it, they wouldn't.
They wouldn't.
They're rare. I started there. I was able to create $2 million producers in that environment. The one of them still stays in touch with me. But fast forward into my time with you and working with all of your clients and getting to have that kind of bird's eye view all over North America, no matter what size market they were in, no matter what country, no matter what coast, the problems were always the same. And most of it came back to the mentality, has been passed down from generation to generation in our industry on what makes a good producer. And so that gave me great experience to come here at Oak Bridge, where we went from 30 million to 120 million. And, we're headed to 300 now. We are a production centric company. And we have executive committees, lots of the biggest producers in our firm are engaged and involved, and their voices are heard, and they contribute a lot to the decisions that get made. These are the guys that are sending the recruits, right? So I'm still working with their mentality, but a quick funny story is I've been saying forever, they got to be wired. I got to onboard them. You got to stay out of it. No technical training until they're, I know they can sell. And it's been, I would say, some resistance. Let's say it that way.
Yeah, of course.
But the other day, and I don't know if I did this consciously, but I started saying, well, you know what? We can hire people that aren't naturally wired because we can, turn them out into these other roles. And one of the agency principals that sits on the executive committee goes, Cynthia, is that the best use of your time? I'm like, well, actually, Thomas, if I could just work with the guys that are naturally wired that I onboard and then stay with for 20, I could be churning out $1 million producers in 5 years all day long. And he goes, well, that's what be better. This was a man that's a traditional mindset about who to hire.
Which was hire a nice person that comes from a good family that is local, and we're
That's
going to
not
teach
wired
them
for sales.
that's not wired for sales. We're going to send them off and get a CIC and teach them about technical stuff. They'll sit around the office and wait for leads to come in, and they'll either quit
We will
or.
go out with them on any lead they get and close the deal for them.
So the mindset of the traditional agency principal is what you just said.
Mm-hmm.
Find a nice person that's local, that comes from a good family, and let's give them a shot. They don't interview them hard, they don't test them hard, and then they don't onboard them hard. So let's talk about when you get somebody that is wired for sales that you believe in, you got a 90-day process that's pretty bold, and then they go live on day 91. That's what I've heard you talk about. So talk about that some, would you?
I'm a wedge purist, as you've heard me say before. We set their goals. Then we make sure, I know you always used to say, if they can't learn the wedge in 2 weeks, you shoot them. Well, we don't quite do it that way, but we do. I don't let them move on to the next step until they can do a role play and that they're happy with that's been videotaped. That's in the first chunk. The second chunk is I spend a whole month with them developing their prospect bank so that they can play where they can win. because one of the things that I saw working with you and over my history is the biggest place where they make mistakes is they do that on the job training with niches. I've perfected my niche development process quite a bit now. And I used to have them research 3 to 5 niches. Now I'm just having them pick one with a maybe. And I've gotten a lot more in depth with them on developing their understanding of that specific niche. And in fact, I just this year implemented a whole new strategy because the proactive services unit used to report to me. And so I built a lot of the stuff in Big Niche. And we track all the cost containment reports, all that. We did some work with you to get them to where they can show value and impact. Well, that's all paying off now because now when I hire a new producer, I send them 5 to 7 cost containment reports from existing business in the firm. I make them do a little spreadsheet. They put the name and then they put the services and then they plot out the actual cost containment impact in their niche. And then they total all the columns so that they know individually where the impact comes from. Because that's what they were struggling with a lot was really understanding the impact of those services. I talk about it, it's like you got to know what the swing is, because the underwriters are either debiting or crediting, dumpster fire versus best in class. You got to know what that is. So I was struggling with how do you teach them that? And thanks to the, cost containment reports, I've now found a way that I think is just going to, like I said, I have a pretty bold statement. I could turn out $1 million producers in 5 years all day long.
All right, so let's talk about this a little bit because we're using some language that maybe some people are not familiar with. So within Big Nation, clients, Big Nation clients have the ability to break down their services in whatever category they want. Loss control, claims management, exposures and analysis, worker comp, transportation, blah, 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 whatever it is. And many of those categories have 3, 5, 7, 10 services. From there, you can drag and drop that onto a timeline and then produce a written service plan for a client. All right. So big deal. Well, it is a big deal because now you've gone from making verbal promises with your mouth is moving to now something documented that says, here's what we're going to do for you.
Yeah.
Now there's a plan of action and there's accountability in place. But where it gets really beautiful, and you guys took it to a fantastic deal, is you go, we want to be able to now monetize this. And you guys monetize it 2 ways. Number one, you monetize the actual work that you do. We put 2 hours in on that. We put 3 hours in on that. We put 5 hours in on that. And those hours are worth, say, $250 an hour. So we did additional work of $2,500 or $5,000 or whatever. And so you're able to put the value of the work you did. Secondarily, because we did that work, when we found that reserve that was out of whack at $110,000, we got it down to 30 grand where it's supposed to be. Then the impact of that on your mod and therefore your future cost, I'm making up, is $30,000. So when you start to find a $30,000 impact here, $30,000 impact there, $20,000 impact there, it adds up to $80,000 impact we had on your business this year. Mm-hmm. So that's what she's talking about in terms of monetization and impact. Now, what I heard you say, which I think is brilliant, because in my previous sales jobs, the hardest thing about it was when I didn't believe.
Right.
Didn't believe. And people said, you should believe, just be confident. I still didn't believe.
Right.
So now the way you're building belief is having them take those cost containment reports, do an analysis on the impact, add it up, down, bump, bump. So then our firm for that set of clients had 80 grand impact, 90 grand impact, $20,000 impact, boom, boom, boom. Here's what they paid us. Here's what we did. Oh. Now I know what I'm selling rather than just being some mockingbird. Very powerful. And
yeah. All 4 of the successful candidates, that's what when they tell their stories, they all 4 say the same. It took me a while. It took me till I could actually start to see the services and the impact to my own client before I really bought in. Before that, I was a mockingbird.
We all, including myself, I've got some clients that we've done a great job of monetizing or calculating a real case study of impact. So in the insurance industry, everybody says we have good people, we got great services, we got all this sort of stuff, but none of it has any really guts to it. And you put the guts to this stuff, making it very real. All right, so awesome. Do the goals, learn the web sales process, record it, verify that they're capable of doing it at a competent level. Spend a month then going and building the niche. And then within that niche, they're probably interviewing underwriters and loss control people and different things like that, looking at clients, going to websites. What are the biggest top problems? And then from those problems, then come back and do that analysis on the impact that you guys are having, and then match up problems with impact. Am I hearing that right?
Yes.
Wow, that's good.
Then I have them do some study and in that middle. So first it's goals and the wedge sales process. Then it's, build your bank, play where you can win. I have them research their competition. And it seems like that, everybody always goes, how am I going to know? I don't know, blah, blah, blah. I make them, review the website. And what can you tell by just looking at this website? Put them in buckets. Okay. So you don't have to know every detail in the beginning, but every time you go out to play, you're going to win or you're going to learn. We do CRIS meetings. So there's a heavy focus on it's what you do that the incumbent's not doing is where your competitive advantage is. So I've got them zeroed in on competition. I've found if I don't do that, they continue to just want to stack up the proactive services based on what they think the buyer should have instead of just staying focused in on what the incumbent's not doing.
Yeah. Well, it's okay. So that's another interesting thing because you look at this a lot of different ways, but you take almost any city in North America, you're going to run into a top five, a top 10, and maybe then a top 15, something like that, right? I mean, there's not an infinite number of competitors, and there are strong competitors, middleweight, and then there's bantamweight. The strong competitors are what I always think of as resource rich. They've got all the capabilities, but doesn't mean they deliver them. The middle deal is kind of a blend of that, and then your bantamweight, all you got to do is go on their website, and the first thing that pops up is for a free quote.
Yeah.
And then they talk to you about our partners. And then when you look at the partners, it's basically they're listing all the carriers they represent. And so by definition, that is a price coverage reactive services firm that does nothing for their accounts other than renew it and respond to the need for certs. And if you have a claim, help you get it reported. And that's about it. You agree with me on that?
I do, except for you forgot that they bring the turkey at Christmas.
Oh, yeah, the turkey at Christmas. Then on the flip side, on the top side, the resource rich people, they kind of come in two camps. The ones who have got a lot of resources and actually deliver it. And they document their deliverables, they do it, they follow through, and they create some accountability that we were talking about with the cost containment report. But there's a lot of those big regional private equity owned firms, people that are resource rich, and the producers can't articulate what their resources do. They just say we have them and they don't really deliver. They just talk about it. And so the more your guys can go in and do that, then they start to feel confident by knowing that, now I know how to go beat them because that's where my prospect, their client's being underserved. So goals, learn the wedge, build out your niche, build out a database, research your competition. And now we got to get them on the phone setting appointments, because we're talking about newbies. And most of them are loaded with relationships that they can just go out and start leveraging relationships. They got to get on the phone and start dialing. Is that right?
That is correct.
All right. So talk to about how do you get them ready for that? What's your process? What have you done to try to optimize that ability?
So they learn obviously the bold statement appointment setting stuff. I personally don't spend a ton of time helping them build out the 5-layer voicemail. I teach them to have a process and to understand their steps. And then there's other people inside of our firm, and I send them to you for the whole how do they get it all built out in Bignition. There is some momentum being created now where you've got more of them talking about, I had a good score and I picked up the phone and I got an appointment.
Yeah.
Imagine that. But I have them come to peer groups every week and they have to present. I made this many dials, I had this many conversations, and I set this many appointments. And then I have them converted into their ratios. And we talk about, is that better or worse than last week? What'd you do different? What'd you learn? So that they're learning from each other. I think the peer group is helping them a lot.
All right, so I'm just gonna introduce people what the 5-layer email voicemail is.
Okay.
I don't know what or when this popped in my mind. It was during COVID where I had time to think, but I don't know why I acted on it. But nevertheless, I did. And my fundamental thought is if I'm a producer, new or old, and I'm making cold calls, if I'm doing any volume at all, I only could get one of three things. I get the buyer that I want, at which point I deliver a bold statement appointment setting. I get the gatekeeper, at which I make a friend and work to get info and position myself and try to get some help. Or the number three thing is I'm going to get their voicemail. And what most producers on the first time they get a voicemail is they leave the, hi, my name is Randy Schwantz, Schwantz Insurance Agency, and we focus on contractors. I'd like to talk to you about your insurance. Please give me a call at blah, 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 blah. And they hang up. And they know that that was a adequate but crappy voicemail, and they'll never repeat it again. So next time they call, they get the buyer's voicemail, they just hang up. And they hang up and they hang up. And that is a lot of wasted opportunity. What do I mean by opportunity? Every time I drive down the highway, I see Verizon sign. Well, there's Verizon. Well, there's Verizon. Well, there's Verizon. Well, I already know who Verizon is. Why does Verizon keep advertising? Because Verizon is trying to position themselves in my mind as a resource at the point that I get upset with what's going on with my cellular service. They just want to stay there. Well, how does a producer do the same thing? Well, our two tools are a voicemail and email. And what we kind of conceptualized is if I could come up with the top 5, 6, 7, 8 problems that buyers hate about insurance that we can solve, and I build my voicemail email strategy around that where they just kind of stack up, that over a couple of months, I can take 200 prospects that don't know me from Adam, and within 6 weeks, 8 weeks, because of the volume that I'm doing, the majority of those people will know who I am and what I stand for. Now, does that mean it's going to convert into an appointment immediately? No, it's not. But the thing that you mentioned a little while ago is because of the way the emails are sent out within the system, it gets a score. If it gets delivered, it gets a point. If it gets opened, it gets 2 points. If it gets forwarded, it gets more points. And so then a producer comes in and goes, that headline is getting people's attention. And that score on it is like 7. So you know people are paying attention to it. So then I'm going to call that guy because they're engaged with my content, what I got going out. So when people talk about content, you ought to get a lot of content. I mean, this is very focused content to very specific people about very specific problems that you solve. And this is how I believe in positioning new producers as problem solvers for that database of 200 to 300 prospects that they have.
I mean, the best thing, what I encourage them with is that buyer is going to hear from you more than they're going to hear from their current agent.
And not just hear from you, but they're hearing messages about problems that they have that there are solutions for.
Yeah.
And stacking, 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 stacking. And then the buyer goes, this dude's a thinker. Everybody else is calling me and saying, can I quote on your insurance?
Yeah.
So then you teach them both same appointment setting, or you let me teach it to them. You work with them in peer group to get their strategy set up by layer email voicemail. Then you get together like weekly on a peer group and just have them share their numbers, dials, conversations, appointments, and then what they're learning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then you,
Ed, go
I
ahead.
was going to say, and I'll let you talk about it. And you're also running crisp sales meetings.
Yeah.
Crisp sales meetings are different than a spreadsheet Liars Club meeting. In what way?
Well, I mean, my reputation is that I run a tight ship and that I'm pretty strict. And so there are standards, published standards, you got to come prepared. So we do 3 things in those CRIS meetings. We prepare, we do a pre-call strategy on a new business appointment. If you're new in this business and you don't have an appointment every week, something wrong. So you're coming, we're getting you prepared for that new business appointment. I'm also doing debriefs in there because, somebody went out, we helped them get ready last. They came back. Here's what happened. We're doing debriefs in there. And then we're also doing red hot introductions where the new guys are hearing the impact. So we do those 3 things and that's it.
Now, what's interesting about red hot introductions is that when a producer writes an account, immediately there's a story for how that account got written. And in Big Nation, we've got a strategy we call SODAR, where you can map out what was their situation when you met, what all was wrong, how did you get in, was it a cold call or introduction, D for decision, what led up to them hiring you, and really get that producer to map that stuff out. What did you do that led up to winning it? A for action is now what's the service plan? What are you committing to deliver? Then R is for results. And sometimes you get results fast because of what happened during renewal. Other times it takes a year to get the results, which comes back to the cost containment report. So all of that stuff is pulling out of people quantifiable, actionable. Here's the value we bring to the table.
And you know what I think is the most powerful? This is my experience, right? Doing this for what you said 30. I've been doing this part, developing other sales talent for a good 20 now. I love the SODAR for the situation because to me that's the messaging. If you have somebody that's good at understanding what the real problem is that was solved, because a lot of producers want to talk only about the solution. That red hot introduction process gets them the right side up where they're starting with the problem and then connecting the actions to those problems and then the results that they're getting. And my experience is we get the biggest amount of quantifiable result right away, first year. I'm asking these guys. Cal walks around, I think his book's 2.8 now or whatever. Only wedge guy we have that's fully developed in that, but he tells them your sale isn't finished until you've asked for the red hot. It's always been my belief that you ask for the red hot at policy delivery 90 days in. And that, there's a lot of worry and concern about, well, I haven't had any results yet. Yeah, but I bet you have. As you go back, I've had all my year 3 guys pull the SODARs on all of their top accounts and identify the commonality. What were the common problems I'm solving for people and what solutions did we put in place and the timeline on that, and then what the results are. That really accelerates them out of the cold call business straight into red hot introduction. And then for their networking with centers of influence, it's what catapults them to that whole new level so quick.
You're able to manage all that stuff inside of Ignition, not on some spreadsheet or piece of paper or whiteboard. Is that correct?
Yeah. You don't want this redhead to find out you're working on a spreadsheet outside of Ignition.
Yeah. Going back to the SODAR that she's talking about and the situation or getting the problems on the table. What's interesting about doing that, as you are recounting those problems, all problems are caused because the incumbent's not doing their job.
Right.
Not just what does a prospect think they have a problem, blah, blah, blah. Every problem they have is because the incumbent's not doing something in the form of proactive service that then becomes a future wedge for us.
Yep.
So there's this deep correlation between you building out your proactive service stack that then converts into wedges, and then the inefficiencies of incumbent agents and what they're not doing to service their clients, which is where clients have problems, their clients have problems, our prospects, and then we can just go wedge the poop out of them. And that's how you can get newbies who are wired, they got the DNA for sales to be able to go do $200,000 every year for the first 5 years and build $1 million books. Pretty powerful.
I've got a guy that we hired February 1st, 2022. His practice is $716,000 in revenue. And I make them do analysis all the time. And one of the analyses that I make them do is how many of your customers, how much of your revenue came from cold calling? That particular guy has one. Because I love this industry. It's been very, very good to me. But our industry has really, earned its bad reputation out there because we train all our newbies to cold call and they're all bad at it and blah, blah, blah. So part of what I'm trying to do now is get those guys out of the cold call business as quick as possible. This particular guy is really good at working a room. So he's getting all his business from centers of influence and at networking events, association meetings, stuff like that.
That's awesome.
But his messaging wouldn't be as good if we weren't doing those crisp meeting debriefs and SODARs and getting him ready and helping him think through and pushing him to think about who those buyers know. Now it's at the point where when they start telling me about a deal, they always start including immediately. They haven't even won the deal yet. Now they're talking about, well, it's this account and this account and this account and this account. So great red hot source. They're just trained now to think that way.
Yeah. So you see what your brain has been trained to see.
Mm-hmm.
Accountability, two things floating in my mind. One is accountability, and the other is when you said, Yeah, I make them do an analysis. Well, I think, and I agree, it's like the more you make somebody do an analysis, they're having to use their brain to do the analysis. And then they come up with their own discovery rather than you tell them something is true. They come up with their own discovery. Same way, when we, like in Big Nation, we have our goal setting process gets people to think about, and this is probably most effective for somebody who's got a three, four, $500,000 book of business who's patting themselves on the back because they validated, and the agency owners leave them alone because they're validated and they're not costing them money. But the problem is, even with a $500,000 book of business, at 30%, you're making 150 grand. You're giving Uncle Sam 50, 55 of it. You're living on 95. How many people living on $95,000 are saving 50 or 60 grand a year? Almost nobody, unless the spouse is incredibly successful. So by having them do that analysis about how much money they need to make and save to fund cars, universities, and weddings and fund their retirement so that 20 years from now, 25 years from now, they are wealthy. The whole point is when you have them do that analysis, they start to own the problem. If you don't have them do the analysis, then you just become like big sister or mama tell me what I have to do. And people resent that. So that's another, I think, just a powerful insight that you just brought to the table is like have them do an analysis and do it frequently rather than less often so that they're owning both the problem and the result that they're getting. That's awesome.
Miss Aureli, I'm still using that growth capability review that you and I designed, what, 8 years ago? I'm still using it because it's powerful. They learn a lot in it. But the other point I was going to make in the grid hiring process, in the final step, I am pulling up Bignition and I am, working through some of the finance. If they've got the ABC list, I'm plugging those numbers in. And I have to say, anybody that's not doing that is missing an opportunity. I mean, we made 8 offers and hired 6. The 2 offers that got made, I did not authorize. Until they tell me they're going to accept the offer, I don't issue it. But there's some people in our company that don't believe that yet. Once you show them that, you can see the spittle running down the sides of their mouth. They want that financial planning tool that's built into the software. And that's what I tell them what I do for a living is make millionaires. And they start to believe me.
Well, I feel Bignition clients have a huge competitive advantage, certainly in recruiting and getting people to want to come to work for them.
Mm-hmm.
Because A, you do turn them into millionaires, really multimillionaires. And it's not just chatter, it's a sales process, a prospecting process, a differentiation process, a goal financial management process, a retention platform. And then you've got all the metrics to set on top of it. And you're coaching them through that on a consistent basis. You don't let them hit a wall. You keep pushing them through those next tiers of it.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing stuff.
And now we're starting to have real living, breathing humans with, fancy boats and wonderful cars and homes and great stuff. In the process, you're supposed to send them to 3 producers. Well, I pick $1 million producer, a $500,000 producer, and a newbie. Wedge guys, of course, because of what they're supposed to interview to find out. But now they're getting to hear the difference and they're getting to talk to a real live example. It's not just pie in the sky. Promise.
Very powerful. And here's what I'm thinking about. You take a corporation that went from 20 million to 100 million on the plan to go to 300 million. They're out there buying, acquiring a lot of people, a lot of firms using all the traditional selling models, which is the price coverage relationship. They're running spreadsheet liars club meetings. They're hiring people they like. There's zero accountability as a general rule. They got great accounts, but they also, just as a general rule, they write things that move rather than being really targeted on that. There are agency owners out there that are, I mean, a big part of their growth strategy is both acquire and do it organically. Why is it, in your opinion, so difficult to get these acquired agencies to step up and play this game that is so much more productive and can make so much money? Why is that so hard?
It's getting easier now that I've got some living, breathing humans and they get to see the report. It's proving it. I mean, some of them are, family, next generations. They're small firms and small firms operate in a different environment. I mean, I've got lots of acquired producers in the program, but not all of them. Tell me
So,
the question again. What was the question? I can't
yeah,
even remember.
well, I would think not necessarily you would think or anybody else, but I would think that if I made an acquisition, the same thing is what you're selling to a new producer to come to work here is I'm going to turn you into millionaires. You make an acquisition, you go, we're going to pay you a lot of money for this firm, so you get to make a lot. But we're going to give you the opportunity to turn that into even a lot more money by engaging with us on the sales process, our differentiation process, writing bigger accounts, and being a part of this thing. That is, there's plenty of evidence that this will get you there faster. And yet people walk by it rather than going, how do I step into it? I was just wondering if you had any sort of like
Because
now.
they don't want to change. They got their earn out period. They just want to do blah, blah, blah. But now half of them are coming to Oak Ridge because of the producer development. So they usually have a candidate or two in their back pocket as soon as they come on board. Unfortunately, I haven't had enough time to help them understand that the candidate they got in the back pocket is not going to help them in their earn out.
Right.
So what I've been doing, and this has always been an idea of mine, it's like I'm training them up and then associating them with the agencies that we've acquired that are most conducive to, or that won't destroy the work, right? That they're supporters of it. I'm planting them in there and giving them a producer, and then they're starting to go, oh wow, that really does work. It's still not for me, which is the biggest problem. It's like people aren't going to do what you say, they're going to do what you do. So if they're not walking their talk, it's a challenge. The agency principals don't do it because they don't want to change.
But having been around them, and I know you've had a couple of glasses of wine with them, why is it they don't want to change?
Yeah, I don't know. I think they think they're doing good enough. I think they think they're entrenched in the operations side. They lose their passion for selling. They're burned out. I mean, I'm seeing faces go by as I'm listing those things.
Yeah.
They want to be in management. They want to be in the C-suite. They don't want to sell direct anymore.
And
That's what
they don't have a coaches or development heart. That's not who they are. So
I think they want to. I think they want to do that. They just don't know how. And they've made so many hiring mistakes. There's a couple of them walking around going, "Hey, I got to prove her wrong. I want it, my mission is to prove Cynthia wrong." And they just can't.
right.
It's like it's not me. The process is what works.
Awesome. I sent you an email going, we ought to do a sales leaders boot camp next year. What I didn't say is, I think you and I ought to do a sales leader boot camp for the public at large. I'll market it, and then we come in and we use shared experiences to make that happen. That, and whether or not you want to do one for Oak Ridge, I think that would be cool too. We could do that and get some stuff out of it. But I see doing probably a sales leader boot camp twice a year, and you bring so much to that with evidentiary things that are real. I just think it'd be a lot of fun. And then we just kind of split up the duties and go do it. So anyway, if you want to do that, we'll get on the docket and maybe look like maybe next April or May and start trying to figure out how to promote it and then build a landing page, all that stuff. I think it'd be a lot of fun.
I love the idea, especially because, people consider me to be a sentimental person. My first day working with you was at the Gaylord in a sales leadership boot camp. That was always my favorite. Always my favorite. And that's the day I met Hal Foshi.
I kind of remember that sort of deal.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Let's do this again soon. This is fun.
Yeah,
And
it's blessed.